currently you are in cooperative housing development in Nova Scotia. And our speaker is Michael Norris, who's the manager of cooperative housing development with the Co-op Housing Federation of Canada. And I will hand it over to Michael.
Thank you so much, Celia. It's really a pleasure to be with you all here. I'll ask my maestro to start the timer down here if possible, so that I don't keep you here too long. It's really a pleasure to be here on Mi'kmaq land. The Mi'kmaq have been here for 10,000 years, and we pay respects to their stewardship of these lands for the past 10,000 years. My name is Michael Norris. I'm the manager of cooperative housing development at CHF Canada. And just question by a show of hands, how many of you are involved with your CLT on the board, in the admin? All right, that's good. And do some of you volunteer with a CLT? Okay, all right. And who's involved with cooperative housing specifically? All right, this helps me gear kind of my presentation as we move forward. So I've been working in co-op development for 6 years now, learned a lot, and we just got out of the latest round 2 cooperative housing development program funding round. So lots of submissions. I'll go through some of those applications today. And some of the lessons learned, we were able to support 23 proponents across Canada and learned a lot through that process, and have learned a lot through the partners that were also funded in round 1 of the Cooperative Housing Development Program as well. So lots of great lessons, hoping to share some of those with you today and really highlight some of the great work going on here today in Nova Scotia as well. So I tried to divide it into 3 parts. First, I'm going to go through the Cooperative Housing Development Program and Federal Lands Initiative. Just a disclaimer, I'm gonna get a little bit technical in this part here for this application. It's going to look like how community land trusts can leverage the Cooperative Housing Development Program and other CMHC programs, like on a very mechanical basis, and the things that you need to consider when doing that in order to build confidence when you're approaching these programs, which are very important. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go through Nova Scotia co-op development, so really some concrete examples of how we've seen this implemented. And there are some great examples in Nova Scotia. 2 of the 3 announced first round cooperative housing development applications were in Nova Scotia. So I think that speaks to the capacity here. And then part 3, I've come here with a pitch, and that is that community land trusts and co-op housing, we work together to build more co-op housing, non-market housing across this country. And I really do believe this, and I hope that when you leave this presentation, you feel the same way, if you don't already. So as I said, we are on Mi'kmaq land today. And this is Compass Nova Scotia Cooperative Homes. This is our newest occupied cooperative housing entity in Halifax. It's actually, if you're staying at the Moxie Hotel, it's like quite literally a 4 to 5 minute walk from there. It's a beautiful building, just over 50 units on Maitland Street, and it's got a beautiful rooftop as well. And so if you're curious, it's behind the Staples. You're more than welcome to check it out. There's the address. It's a wonderful building, and all of those units are at or below 80% of median market rent. So affordable housing at the onset, what we're trying to build. So I do need to give credit where credit's due, and I have a fantastic team, one of whom is here to evaluate me, obviously, but that is us. We work to support groups and all groups in navigating the Cooperative Housing Development Program and understanding co-op housing a little bit better. And we're more than happy to do that for all of you as well. We offer application supports for the Cooperative Housing Development Program. It is completely free, okay? We don't take any money. We don't want to. We want to ensure that that is reinvested into your projects and that your projects are successful. So thank you so much to them for their support. Thanks to their support, this is my first time actually unveiling some of this information. So you're the firsts to kind of know this, to know this. CHF Canada supported 28 projects through the Round 2 Cooperative Housing Development Program. That included 23 complete applications, and we'll get into the nitty-gritty of that soon, representing 3,200 units across the country. There is demand for cooperative housing development. You just need to ask our members and the long wait lists that they have. This represents $1.42 billion, all right? The program in itself is 1.5. So there is a tremendous amount of demand for this program, and our federal advocacy priorities, though I'm not on our public affairs team, is to ensure that this momentum is sustained and continued. This is the first federally funded cooperative housing development program in over 30 years. So this is a very critical juncture for us in the sector. You might just want to take note of the average viability score, just for benchmarking purposes, was 72 for this round for the proponents and groups that we supported. And 11 of those projects were over 100 units. So really building scale, right? And ensuring that the momentum of the sector is sustained as well, and hoping to sustain that through partnership with community land trusts. So setting the stage here, CMHC is a very important partner when you're building non-market housing in Canada. Right now, these are some of the programs that are currently available nationally that can be leveraged. Today specifically, I will be speaking to the Federal Lands Initiative and the Cooperative Housing Development Program, where our team tends to play most. But that being said, any of these programs can be leveraged to build co-op and non-market housing. So the Cooperative Housing Development Program. Before this morning, by a show of hands, how many people had heard of this program? All right. So I would say a small majority of you. This journey started about 4 to 5 years ago, when CHF Canada partnered with CMHC to co-design this program. This is unique. This is one of the first times that we've been involved in this type of process of co-design with CMHC. So it was a very collaborative process, and I'll outline some of the components of where input was taken to be able to facilitate this program's development, and how that works to the advantage of you if you're interested in using this program. Round 1 closed on September 15th, 2024. Round 2 closed on August 22nd, 2025. So we're just coming out of that. It was a lot of work. And we anticipate, though subject to change evidently, a third round in the summer of 2026 and a fourth round in summer of 2027, more or less. But this can evidently be subject to change as well. Just because we've had a lot of questions on this, folks ask, where do you actually physically apply? You apply through the CMHC portal like you would any other CMHC program, but we do support you in preparing that application and ensuring that it is complete. CHDP and land trusts. So it was very important for CHF Canada that land trusts be eligible to apply to the Cooperative Housing Development Program. This is something that CHF Canada advocated for. Why? Because we want to build scale, and we think that community land trusts are a good way to partner and to build that scale. And I'll explain why as I move forward in this presentation. CLTs do need to partner with a nonprofit housing co-op for that eligibility to be extended through the program. So the units need to be part of a nonprofit housing co-op, and that nonprofit housing co-op can sign an operating agreement or a lease with that community land trust, depending on the relationship that community land trust wants to have with the units. And I'll go into 2 examples of that in this presentation today. As I said, we can provide support for free, so please feel free to reach out to us. Go talk to Alex, who's in the crowd today. If you want any support, we'd be more than happy to assist. And CHDP is a very generous program. It can cover pre-development costs, obviously ex post, right? You're not going to get those cash flows until you are approved for the program, but it can come in and reimburse those costs. It can cover land costs. So not all programs can cover land costs, but it can. Hard and soft construction costs, as well as financing costs. Okay, so it's fairly all-encompassing. What's unique about this program, when you start distinguishing it from other CMHC programs, is it can cover 100% loan to cost. This was important for CHF Canada. We wanted a program that could come in and fund your entire project, and we have examples of where it has come in to fund entire projects, okay? The Affordable Housing Fund, for example, is 95%. And so even if it's just 5%, folks who do development know very well that getting that 5% can sometimes be very difficult. I did want to go into some eligible expenses, and it's easier to go into the non-eligible expenses than to go into the eligible expenses because they are all encompassing. It's a very exhaustive list. And there are some components here that will be important for community land trusts to consider. And those of you also taking photos of the slides, you're welcome to take photos, but these will also be distributed after. So you're more than welcome to take them away as well. As I said, the eligible expenses, land costs, this includes lease payments. And so if there is a leasehold relationship with a community land trust, and that's the agreement that you want to proceed with, those lease payments are eligible CHDP expenses. Environmental remediation is also an eligible expense under those land costs. And so we've heard some misconceptions about this. If you are buying a contaminated property, buyer beware, do your due diligence, very important. But those environmental remediation costs are eligible expenses under this program. Notice how I say land cost and not land value. They're not the same thing, right? And so if you are just going out to that property, getting an appraisal and saying, this is the value of the property, you might want to do a little bit more due diligence than that. And so CMHC will ask for more due diligence than just a mere appraisal, okay? And if we can go more into the details of how you can attest to the value of that property and the cost that it is to acquire it, if you want to ask me some questions after, just for time purposes. Non-eligible expenses, interest on invested capital in bonds, right? So CLTs use community bonds and other financial instruments to raise money. If you are expecting to pay out those bonds with Cooperative Housing Development Program monies, you can do so on the principal. You cannot on the interest, okay? If you are having to pay out the interest, then that would be a program exception that you'd have to ask CMHC for. So I'm not CMHC, so I'm not going to tell you it's impossible, but that is what the program dictates, okay? Furnishing costs, other than appliances and fixtures, so your 80-inch television, sorry, not included. Costs already covered under another National Housing Strategy initiative, except for your seed loan. So your seed loan is actually repaid by your Cooperative Housing Development Program because Cooperative Housing Development Program monies pay for pre-development monies and supports, okay? There's some common misconceptions here as well. This is very, very important. All of your expenses must be reviewed and confirmed by a certified professional, okay? This is, I would say, new in the last 10 to 15 years. This wasn't always the case. Normally, they would just request that hard costs, so those specific construction costs, be verified by the quantity surveyor or the QS. Now you will want your land costs, your soft costs, your financing costs included in that Class B cost estimate. What does that look like in practice? That is assembling your service agreements, any quotes that you may have, invoices, and sending those over to the quantity surveyor so that they can attest to the values of that, right? Because the quantity surveyor, if you're just telling them the amounts, they will quite literally put into the Class B report, client attested to amount being this. And CMHC will look at it and be like, right? Where's the paper trail in order to guarantee that, right? So this is very important and relatively novel. The eligibility requirements for the program. I'm going to go into some of the eligibility requirements. This is very important. And again, it's quite specific, but I trust that you'll follow me through this. As I'd mentioned, nonprofit housing co-ops are eligible in partnership with community land trusts, evidently. New construction is eligible. Conversion of non-residential buildings, also eligible. And one of the things that's not commonly known is that forward sales of pre-construction condos are also eligible. And so if you are a community land trust and you are working with a developer who is currently building a site and is interested in providing you with a number of units in that site, that is eligible. But the questions you need to ask are as follows. 1, do those units meet accessibility requirements of the program? I would say this is generally where the cart falls off the wheels fall off the cart, right? Because those accessibility requirements cannot be met by the units you are seeking to acquire. So I'd ask that first. If not that, the second question you need to ask, does it meet the energy efficiency requirements? It may not reach those. All right, so that's the second question to ask. And then the third question to ask is if they are not condos and they are purpose-built rental, I would ask the developer if they are already using a CMHC program to finance those units. Because if they are, even if it's mortgage loan insurance, like the MLI Select program, you may have some complications in taking out one CMHC product with another. It's possible. There are some unit minimum requirements for the program. So if you're in a census metropolitan area, over 100,000 people, the Halifax metropolitan area, for example, there's a 75 unit minimum requirement for construction, okay? If you are in a census agglomeration, so that's 10,000 to 99,000 people, then that goes down to 30 units, all right? This is by design. We're trying to build scale through this program. And so I understand that, you know, those specific thresholds can be frustrating, but where I'm really excited about the opportunity to work with community land trusts is your land acquisition strategies are checkerboard, and you can do portfolio development through the Cooperative Housing Development Program. So the question then becomes, looking at your portfolio, how can you get to 75 units or 30 units across multiple sites? That is an eligible strategy and approach to the Cooperative Housing Development Program, okay? So we have to work within the funding parameters and find the solutions for your specific projects, okay? This is not an affordable housing development program. It is not, especially not at the onset. This is also by design. The housing charge benchmark for this program is 110% of the post-2000 build median market rent. That is a very niche statistic, and it doesn't exist in large swaths of the province, right? It also doesn't exist in large swaths of the country. If you are looking for this statistic and you cannot find it, please reach out to us. We can help you find it, all right? And if you want to stay after today's session and for me to show you how to find it, I'm more than happy to do so, okay? Notice how it says housing charges below. There is a ceiling to the housing charges that you can charge under this program for a period of 20 years. There's no minimum, there's no floor. The lowest housing charge that we saw in the second round of the Cooperative Housing Development Program was 16% of median market rent, 1/6. All right, so you can build affordable with this program, but the reality is that since 2020, construction costs are up 58% across this country, all right? And I understand that there's regional variance, right? I'm not taking that into consideration. But if we look at rent acceleration, that is in and around 20%. And so when you have construction costs that have accelerated 3 times more than rents across the country, you're going to require more money to be able to build. It's just a fact, okay? So you can build affordable, but we needed to give you the flexibility to be able to operate within like a large magnitude to be able to fund these units and make them work, all right? How you make them work is your prerogative, right? Co-ops are built on member representation and democracy. And so as a co-op, you should be able to decide what your housing charges are, and this program allows for that flexibility. I've talked a lot about the energy efficiency and accessibility requirements. The energy efficiency, this is the technical requirements, Tier 2 of the National Energy Code of Canada. It's basically 25% more efficient than your average standard code build today, all right? So it is fairly stringent, but it's not inaccessible. And then the accessibility requirements are essentially a full universal design of the entire building or 20% of the units meeting those CSA standards. The B651 standard is essentially ensuring that all of the public areas in your development are accessible. And then 652 is ensuring that those 20% of units, the lived-in spaces, are accessible, okay? They're very long documents. If you need any clarification on those requirements, you can come speak to us, or even better, talk to an architect. They are specialists in this category. I'm going to go down a little bit of a rabbit hole here, and I'm sure it'll make sense to you folks at the end, but it may not make sense now. The total project debt coverage ratio for this program must be a minimum of 1.0 or more, okay? What does that mean? Does anyone understand what that means? Some of you who are doing development understands what that means. I'm going to explain it to you, okay? A debt coverage ratio is a ratio of money flowing into your development and money going out of your development, right? And so if I have $100,000 coming into my development and $60,000 of that goes to operating expenses, $40,000 of that goes towards my mortgage expense, then all of the money coming in is going out to expenses that are incurred in my budget. I have a debt coverage ratio of 1, right? Because after all of my expenses, I am able to cover my mortgage costs 1 time, all right? Very simple. If your debt coverage ratio is above 1, then you are actually generating more money than you need, right? Your revenues are $110,000 and your expenses are $100,000, for example, right? You're generating more cash than you need to cover your expenses. If it is below 1, then your project's not generating enough money and it is at risk of default, okay? How can you improve your DCR? This is a big question that we are getting. We get a lot of groups who come and like their debt coverage ratio is like 0.97 and they're like, please help me, like I need an extra 3%. The minimum on this program is 1.0, and there are 3 principal ways to do this. 2 of them are quite straightforward and standard. One of them, many of you may not know about. The first one is to reduce capital or operating costs. That's fairly straightforward, right? The second one is to increase your housing charges or other sources of revenue. You don't need to charge the same housing charge on every single unit in your property. You can create a nice portfolio of different housing charges that reflect the need in your community. The third one that's not really known all that well that I want to provide some clarity on is actually decreasing your mortgage loan rate, okay? When CMHC provides lending products, they generally provide those lending products in a 10 or 20-year term, right? So you're committing for 10 years or 20 years to pay that mortgage at that rate, all right? This rate is actually updated every Thursday, and you can ask your client solution specialist at CMHC, or you can come and ask us. We ask CMHC for an update every week, and it's released on Thursdays. There are ways to actually decrease your mortgage loan rate while CMHC provides you with essentially one rate for the completion of your performance. Quicker draws and shorter construction schedules will actually decrease that mortgage loan rate that you are being charged on your project. Why is that? CMHC gets their debt from the Canadian government. The Canadian government issues bonds at a rate and then provides that money to CMHC, who then provides it to you, right? From the moment that the government of Canada issues that money, sends it over to CMHC, they're starting to accumulate a cost, right? They're starting to pay interest on that loan, but they haven't yet passed it on to you. The sooner they are actually able to pass that loan on to you, the lower your mortgage interest rate will be, the lower the risk is, right? And that's why I'm saying quicker construction draws and shorter projects will drop that interest rate amount. Dropping the amount that you're having to pay in interest on your loan increases your debt coverage ratio, right? You're not having to pay as large of a mortgage. Now, this sounds like I'm splitting hairs, and I am, but when you're really close to reaching that 1.0 debt coverage ratio, every dollar counts. A difference of 0.1% is the equivalent on a $50,000 mortgage of $4 million It's not insignificant, right? $4 million on 50,000. That can be substantial and that can improve the viability of your project moving forward. So quicker draws, shorter construction schedule, all right? This is an example of how you can actually gauge the mortgage lending rate that you will receive for your project. This is what's called the yield curve. It's available online. If you just look up Canada bond yield curve, you'll see it. Another way to reduce your mortgage expense, and if any of you own homes, then you know this already, you can get a fixed rate mortgage or a variable rate mortgage. Generally speaking, variable rate is more competitive, but you expose yourself to a risk of escalation, right? With CMHC on the CHDP program, if you choose a 10-year mortgage, the rate will generally be lower than the 20-year mortgage, right? In that 20-year mortgage, you're getting assurance, you're getting commitment, right? In a 10-year mortgage, you're exposing yourself to risk at renewal, okay? The last thing I will say on this is patient capital and community bonds considerations. There's been a great deal of talk on community bonds and where community bonds stand in all of this. I want to be very clear. When your debt coverage ratio is 1, your revenues equal your expenses. There is no free cash flow. There is no available money in that project to pay out patient capital or bonds at maturity if that date is lower than the 10 or 20-year mortgage that you have negotiated with CMHC. And so if you have 5-year community bonds, a DCR of 1, and you're refinancing with CMHC at 10 years, you actually have no money to pay out those community bonds, assuming that money is invested in the project. That is a risk. Now you can assume that all of those bonds will roll over for a second 5-year period, but one needs to understand that risk, okay? I just want to make sure that we're on the same page with this. The last thing that I will speak to in terms of the eligibility requirements is the guarantee. This is a CMHC policy requirement. Policy requirement means that it's very difficult to get accommodations. You require 3 years of non-negative financial statements as an entity or a guarantee to be able to be eligible for CMHC programs, all right? The majority of you work with community land trusts. You will be incorporating a new co-op entity that will be the proponent for this program. Therefore, they will likely require a guarantee because they won't satisfy this requirement. There is possibly one way around this, and one is to increase that debt coverage ratio to 1.1. One of the things that we designed in this program, and we asked for in this program, that is different than the Affordable Housing Fund, is you can actually increase the amount of forgivable loan and grant that you are requesting. AHF, if you put all your numbers in essentially, it'll come back out to you and it'll say, okay, we're gonna give you this much money. This program, you can ask for up to 33% of the total project cost of your project, even if your project does not require it. All right. And so you are essentially picking your risk comfort and your membership's risk comfort vis-a-vis your development. It was very important that cooperatives had this agency for us. You must maintain the 110% post-2000 median market rent for a period of 20 years. Evidently, that's indexed to inflation and CMHC's rates over time. And then the last thing I will mention is that non-residential space is eligible at 1.4%, the debt coverage ratio. So it's a little bit higher, but what this means is that you can actually have non-residential space subsidize your residential units. So your debt coverage ratio for your residential units can be below 1, your non-residential units above 1, and so long as the whole pie is above 1.0, it's eligible. I've talked a lot about eligibility requirements, and I hopefully haven't bored you. But the next step is to ensure that your application is of quality and complete. This is the first thing that CMHC will look at. They want demonstration of land ownership or acquisition. This is generally done through a conditional agreement of purchase and sale or an agreement of purchase and sale. Approved zoning, attestations of energy efficiency and accessibility requirements, which I've spoken to fairly at length. Having an environmental site assessment and a geotechnical. These need to be less than 18 months old, all right? So they need to be fairly new. There is some flexibility at application with the geotechnical because rock doesn't move all that much. But you will need to have that updated prior to your loan agreement with CMHC. And as I had mentioned, the Class B cost consulting report is a non-negotiable. Oops, I went back. Sorry about that. Development and property management experience. I would recommend procuring a property manager. We have a few in the room who you can speak to after the session. It's important that they have demonstrated experience, at least 5 years of it. If you're thinking of doing like self property management, then you'll want to have some sort of procurement strategy or hiring strategy for that property manager. Operating agreements between the co-op and the land trust. Ideally, these would be negotiated prior to the session, or excuse me, the loan agreement, the 3 years of non-negative financial statements, and an organization chart. All right. The organization chart is actually very important for on-reserves proponents. They need to make sure that they actually have chief and council included with them as well, and any other funding agreements and letters, development charge waivers, property tax exemptions, all of these types of things are very important. So after ensuring that you have a complete application, hopefully with the support of CHF Canada, the next thing that you need to look at is what you score, right? The maximum score that you can have under the program is 100. And we said the average for round 2 that we supported was 72. So that gives you a sense of where you need to be in order to be able to be eligible and have a good chance of benefiting from these funds. What you'll see here is that between the amount of forgivable loan requested, lower is better, the cost per unit, lower is better, and the project size, higher is better, and then the shovel readiness, if you're ready to go in 6 to 12 months, you can already get the majority of your points right there. That's 65 points of the 100 points that you would need in order to be very competitive for this program. So I encourage folks to really consider those components. It's very important. The next components are also equally important, but generally what we've seen, and again, we are in a housing crisis, we are in a climate crisis. We can make space for both. What we've generally seen is that the amount of forgivable loan requested increases the more energy efficient you get with your build. This program rewards the less forgivable loan more than it rewards energy efficiency, okay? And so my general advice is go as energy efficient as you can, but don't sacrifice it for more forgivable loan because that will deplete the points that you need to be successful in this program, okay? You can always do a retrofit later. Project location, dedicating units, and Indigenous-led projects all provide points, but these points in order of magnitude are a little bit lower. I highlighted dedicated and targeted because this is a really important definition to write down and to consider. CMHC has 3 definitions for priority group assignment: targeted, dedicated, and designed. Targeted means that the units are made available to those priority groups, but if they are not filled by those priority groups, they can be made available to other folks, all right? Dedicated means that they are made available to those priority groups and they are to be left empty until they are filled by those priority groups. That is the minimum requirement for this program. And designed means that they are dedicated and there is a characteristic of these units that makes them more accessible to that priority group. Moving forward, and I'm running out of time, so I'm going to accelerate. The Federal Lands Initiative. How many folks have heard of the Federal Lands Initiative? A number of you, excellent. It's a CMHC-led initiative with support from federal landowners across the country. All properties are available on a land bank. If you just Google the Canada Land Bank, you can see all the properties that are available Canada-wide. They're made available through sales, through land leases, and you can even see in the bottom right-hand corner there if they're accepting submissions, if they're closed, or if they've already been transferred to the community housing sector. I just took a screenshot of Ottawa because Ottawa has a lot of properties evidently. If you're looking to apply to FLI, FLI can be combined with CHDP, and it's a really competitive way to be able to benefit from capital funding as well as commitments through low-cost lands. The most important things that one needs to consider for a quality federal lands initiative application are commitment to the affordability requirements. These are different than the Cooperative Housing Development Program, but still doable. 30% of the units need to be at 80% of the median market rent or less. This specific median market rent is less than the post-2000. Commitment to site unit minimums. And so Federal Lands Initiative will provide you with a number of units that you actually need to reach, okay? Commitment to energy efficiency and accessibility minimums. These are aligned with the programs. Development experience, either you or your partners, and a demonstrated evidence of community need. Next, it'll take them 60 to 90 days to assess your application. And then the third step is you will sign a tripartite agreement between the landowner, CMHC, and your entity. CMHC will provide a forgivable loan to you for the acquisition of those lands that they will then transfer over to the owner of the lands, and you will sign an agreement committing you to the development of those properties. Best practices. In my experience, from what I've seen, proposals with non-residential space are more complex and expensive. So I would simplify things, especially from an HST standpoint. If you're acquiring land and you need to pay HST on it because it has commercial space in it, they could require 13% HST on the entire value of the land, even if a subcomponent of your development is commercial. So that's one thing to consider. Look for, visit the site. Don't go on the site, right? That's a liability. But take a look at the site, visit it, look for contamination. Is there a gas station next to it? Are there steep slopes? Is there any erosion, power lines? Is there a nice mature tree right in the middle? And look around the site. Try to make sure if there's any risks that you can see that you can identify them before applying. Negotiate a due diligence period, right? You might have success if you ask for it to have a period whereby you can get your deposits returned if you do further due diligence after acquiring the site and you deem it to be not suitable for development, right? And establish a substantial legal budget. I would say that lawyers are doing substantial review of these very large and convoluted documents. So how can we help at CHF Canada? If the post-2000 MMRs are unavailable in your area, if you have challenges aligning your project and funding parameters, if you need assistance with your performa, if you need assistance assembling your project team, or if anything I'm saying sounds overwhelming to you, please contact us. We're happy to help for free. We do this through our Development Essential Service offering, where we offer development essentials at no cost to CHDP applicants, okay? We really want to help and we really want to partner with the community land trusts. We see this as a solution to the housing crisis. We understand the roles of community land trusts to offer these lands in support of affordable housing development, among other things, in perpetuity and the security of tenure. There is a great deal of alignment between our visions and our sectoral vision of cooperative housing through that mandate. So I spoke a little bit to our Unity North Maitland Street project. I do have some statistics on that project if you are interested. The cost per unit of this one was $483,000. And the units are being offered at or below 80% of median market rents. Very exciting. It was also the site that we viewed yesterday, the Upper Hammonds Plains Community Land Trust. This is a remarkable project and a great example of collaboration between the cooperative housing sector and community land trusts. We want to see more of these projects. One of the things that I do want to remark on this particular project, if you allow me, Curtis. You haven't heard what I said yet. Is that the Cooperative Housing Development Program came in and funded this entire project, 100% loan to cost. This is the way it was designed to work, okay? And Curtis, if I may ask, was it a new co-op? It was a new co-op, right? And so did it require a guarantee? That's pretty impressive, huh? So CMHC is willing to work with partners, I think, I hope. And we have examples of this, right? Through the Upper Hammonds Plains Community Land Trust, where a new entity was funded without a guarantor, okay? So I hope this provides you with hope and assurance that you can also work within the parameters of this project using the tools that we've given you. Valley Roots, another Nova Scotia project. Very proud of this one. This one is passive through solar design and net zero performance. So they did achieve that tier 4. Kudos to them. The estimated project cost was 12 million and the cost per unit was 375,000. All right. Substantially less than Upper Hammonds Plains Community Land Trust. It's not a competition. They did get free land. And so I really want to demonstrate the value add that that can bring. Okay. It is a smaller program and it got a great deal of funding from the Nova Scotia government as well. And so that demonstrates the flexibility of this program. It can come in and provide support at 100% or 50% based on what you need. I want to wrap up with a pitch to you all after going through the nitty-gritty of this program on how we can work together. There's 2 ways that I see it. Community land trusts hold land, and you can make it available to the purpose and the mandate of your organization. I certainly hope that you make it available for nonprofit co-op housing development. And there's 2 ways that you can do that. You can either lease the land to the co-op, where the co-op operates independently within the conditions of that lease, and the CLT is the landowner and steward of those lands. The co-op handles all the responsibilities of building, maintenance, repairs, capital expenses, etc. If the CLT wants to play an important role in the operation of that co-op, then they can sign an operating agreement, okay? Now, this is subject to certain provincial legislation requirements, but in general, most provinces will allow the community land trust to own the land and the building and to sublease the operating agreement of those units to a nonprofit housing co-op. And this would be eligible through the Co-operative Housing Development Program as well. In this instance, the CLT owns the land and the buildings, provides long-term stability, and handles the capital investments and capital repairs. And the co-op can focus on what's most important, taking care of its members and the community that surrounds it. There are a great deal of synergies in terms of how community land trusts and nonprofit housing co-ops can work together. And I hope that you will think critically in terms of your role and mandate as a community land trust to how you can evaluate these Nova Scotia projects, how they have leveraged the community land trust model as well as the cooperative housing development program to facilitate growth and partnership between our 2 organizations. I can't name this project specifically, but I want to leave you with a peculiar example of how community land trusts and nonprofit housing co-ops have worked together. This is a rendering of a project that's currently under development. I cannot name where it is. That being said, I want to provide you with the structure by which this was facilitated. The project is 502 units. This is a new co-op entity. It was too much risk for this nonprofit housing co-op to take on alone. And so this nonprofit housing co-op went out into the community and found a land trust partner. That land trust partner was willing to facilitate a partition of the property and assume the responsibility for half of the property. They then subleased all of those units back to the housing co-op so that all of those units can be offered as a nonprofit housing co-op. It can be eligible for the Cooperative Housing Development Program and ensure security of tenure and long-term affordability. So this is a peculiar example where we have 2 sites, one site that was formed into 2 sites to be able to reduce risk and spread risk across the property. And I hope that you will consider that moving forward. And in conclusion, this is another property that I cannot name, that we were not successful, right? The proponent was not successful on. It was not approved, all right? And I want to leave you with this because you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, but you also miss shots that you take as well. And it's just a reality of the sector, right? You're not gonna hit a home run every time. You're going to invest money and time and effort into these projects, and they're not going to work out. Sometimes that's for the best, honestly, because sometimes they work out and they're an absolute nightmare. But all this to be said, and those who know, but right, but it's all for the best, all for the good of the sector, and that's why we do it. And I'm grateful to be around a bunch of great leaders in the non-market and nonprofit and co-op housing sectors today, and the community land trusts. And I want to leave you this as a parting shot to encourage you not to relent in your pursuit of acquiring lands. And I hope in future that we will have more opportunities for collaboration to make these lands co-op homes in the years and days to come. Yes. Yeah, that's oof, okay. Let's yeah, okay. Yes, yeah, no problem. So the question was, what about this project made it not work? A lot of things, but principally, where do I start with this project? So yeah, so it was a federal lands availability. There was a proponent that was working on this development specifically. The minimum unit requirement was 240 units. The proponent who was working on this analysis assessed that in order to be able to reach the 240 unit minimum requirement, essentially all of the units would have needed to be studios, and it would have needed to be like 10 stories tall. So the proponent decided and opted for a more reasonable application that included a unit mix that reflected the needs in the community. And that's what this was. There was also a question of parking and ability to go underground. As soon as you go underground for parking, the cost escalates substantially. Half of the property was also on a flood zone. Yep. So that made it a little bit difficult. You see the back part of the property there actually. That's on the property, but we couldn't build on it as a result of the flood zone. Nevertheless, the proponent, still went through with the application, spent the money, and learned a great deal of lessons along the way. But yeah, happy to discuss this specific project with folks if they have particular questions on it. Yes.
Hello to the people online. There's no light. Oh, they're great. Okay. How much does it cost from your vantage point on average for all the pre-application work that leads to it, even if it's a failed shot?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've seen groups do it like very affordably. I've seen groups not do it very affordably. I think this one costed about $15,000 to put together the application, which is, not as much as you would think. There was another one that I saw that was like 10 grand was actually put into the due diligence in the application. That one was actually successful from what I understand. Where, you need to be prepared is like, you can spend like 10,000 on like the pre-development and the application and the submission. And then like, depending on the province that you're in, like land transfer tax is going to be like 20 times that, depending on the value of the property. And so if you're actually selected as the proponent to move forward with these lands in the land acquisition, you're going to need access to like a capital facility to be able to facilitate that transaction. And that's why I'm saying like, probably going with just residential is optimal because it reduces your risk on the sales tax component of the acquisition, especially if you're paying like property tax on top of that. Like, you might need a substantial amount of money. And then the other thing is like trying to defer out the payments, like lease payments or closing costs or any of that as far out as possible to give you runway to either do additional due diligence on the property and maybe create like a termination clause in the loan agreement so that you can get your deposits back. There will need to be a substantial deposit provided on top of the HST or the land transfer tax that you might pay to be able to acquire the land as well. So I would say the bulk of, your costs are going to be, at the moment of loan agreement and not necessarily in pre-development. You can, loan a facility that will be placed on, as a lien on the land. So you can use the land to be able to facilitate that. And I've seen that done by groups kind of through the transaction. And then, that facility would then be, repaid by the successful funding of a CMHC program or whatever program you're using. But that is evidently a risk that you're taking on with those lands in acquiring them in the first place, and committing to the covenants of the land to build those units by a certain date and ensure that they're affordable. So there is risk involved, absolutely. And the legal costs are astronomical. I think like the legal costs on this project, had it gone through, probably would have been like 40 to 50 grand. Right? So like 4 to 5 times the amount of pre-development that you put into it. I'm at time. Is there any more questions? Yes? Oh, we have more time? Okay.
We have until 10:20.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. My timer clock just went to 0. So
Oh, yeah. We have
wonderful.
until 10:20 and then we have a 10-minute break before the next session. That's right?
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yes.
Okay.
I should know that.
Hi.
So the federal lands initiative is one piece. Are
Yep.
there any provincial land initiatives that, like I know in Nova Scotia, there's all kinds of redundant property that's held by the province as well? Old school sites, what have you, that could be rolled into, land trust opportunities. Are those on anyone's radar?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is a good question that you're asking. It's very province specific. I'm going to defer to my Atlantic colleagues. Does Nova Scotia actually have like a program to make those lands available, or is it very case by case? No? Allison, do you know? I don't think Nova Scotia has a program per se to make those lands available, right? It's case by case.
Yeah, I can't answer that, Michael. I don't know, but
that's okay.
yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's case by case in Nova Scotia, but I know that's the case in Ontario and Quebec as well. There's no formal provincial lands initiative program to make available. Some municipalities are creating programs to make municipal lands available, and I don't think HRM has a program to make those available. But I know that there was like a submission through the Cogswell District redevelopment. There was the opportunity to submit potentially proposals for some of those properties, if I understand correctly. So I know that some municipalities are making programs available. Toronto, for example, has a program for their surplus lands, parking lot lands, and that type of stuff. I think it's called Create TO, but there are programs, but it is a bit hodgepodge.
Down there, all municipally.
There you go. And that's in Nova Scotia, right? Yeah. So the surplus school sites, those have been handed to municipalities. I know in Alberta as well. Alberta has had the surplus school sites also distributed to the municipalities to be made available. And in Edmonton specifically, they were providing land as well as capital dollars. And so that really helps. And then there was like another program that you could apply for at the same time that provided you with operating funding as well. So it's always nice to combine those types of programs. Yes.
Getting my steps in.
Thanks, Celia. I have a philosophical question.
Oh boy. I'm not a philosopher. If that wasn't apparent, I'm not a philosopher.
Well, your chart was super helpful about the ways that trusts and co-ops interact. So I live in Falls Creek South in Vancouver. We have a lot of co-ops. And as our trust, the co-ops are intended to kind of be the core members, existing co-ops,
Yep.
which is different. But we have a big debate about this kind of like, when is a co-op under a trust? And when is it like a rental building where people get to have a social committee? And, there are examples around BC of both approaches. And so I'm wondering what advice you would give a trust as they're thinking, hey, I want to develop a co-op, when there is a really specific kind of co-op ethos. Yeah, like between these two, what would you give a trust specific advice about how to choose which path to follow?
I'm gonna give you the most like co-op advice possible to an answer to that question. Have you gone to the members and asked the members what they want? So like that's how I would approach like that type of, I don't want to call it a dilemma, but that type of challenge is it, co-ops are designed to respond to member needs and desires. And we really try to hone that in our supports to members because, groups are providing a great deal of volunteer time and goodwill to facilitate these developments. And that's because they have a vision for what they want to see. The membership has a vision of what they want to see. And our jobs is to reconcile that vision and the programs that are available to make that vision happen. And it's really important that the member needs and desires stay at the forefront of, that strategy. So if it's what the members want and what the members need to fulfill their obligations and desires, then I think therein lies your answer. So that's the best co-op non-answer I can give you to that question.
I've got one actually, while other people are thinking of theirs. I'm curious, of the projects that you've been supporting, how many of them, or kind of what proportion, are coming from existing housing co-ops, so kind of generated by the demands of their board and membership, and how many are coming from other proponents, other entities like land trusts or other organizations that are wanting to develop new co-ops and don't have that existing base of a co-op membership and board?
It's fairly well distributed, and the reason for that is there are not many existing co-op entities that can build to the scale required to meet unit minimum requirements under the program, right? And so doing like a 20-unit infill development is one approach. From experience, I would say that 20-unit development probably takes as much effort as the 100-unit development. And so, we really need to create scale and think critically about that moving forward. And that has created the opportunity for new entities, including land trusts, to leverage this program. And I encourage that. I think that's fantastic. And we also need to be cognizant of the fact that, when this program was designed, we had the Affordable Housing Fund that was, a five minimum unit count in order to be able to provide development. And so there were programs that those existing co-ops could leverage for infill development as well. But, this program was designed for partnership. And that's why I'm here in front of you today, is because I want to partner to build more co-op homes.
I wonder if you could speak more to the portfolio development piece. I'm thinking about in Nova Scotia where you want that volume of scale, but you're talking about small rural communities that don't actually need 100 units.
Yep.
And I know that Compass has done that with Barton and Shelburne.
That's right. So, admittedly, my geography is not great. I apologize. I can't remember if those specific areas are census agglomerations, but evidently there's the decreased unit minimum count of 30 units for census agglomerations. And for any center under 10,000 people, CMHC reserves the right to approve on a case-by-case basis applications and proponents that are under 30 units as well. 30 units can be quite a substantial build for like a 500-person community, right? Like you're creating a lot of stock and capacity at the onset. So we want to build scale, but we also want to be reasonable in the ways that we're building scale. And one of the ways to be reasonable is to explore that portfolio development opportunity where you're applying, you're looking at checkerboard properties and you're essentially saying, okay, how can we work to establish this as one entity, one proponent, and one co-op, and build it? And I think that community land trusts are well positioned to be able to facilitate that, because that is the land acquisition strategy of a community land trust, at least in my opinion. I'm open to changing my mind, but being able to see the kind of the high level strategy of where those lands are available, scouting them out, doing the due diligence and acquiring them, and then, you know, seeking that portfolio application. There's multiple ways to approach it from like a technical application standpoint. One is, you know, you're going to need to do geotechnical and like environmental site assessment reports on all of those sites and make sure that they're clean or can be made clean. And then moving past that, you know, you can either, it's probably easiest for you to consider like the application as like a whole co-op, you know, with membership across multiple sites. And then to be able to apply like that instead of like doing like different and separate pro formas for like each site, like, cause it just creates redundant and like duplicative work. As opposed to doing one pro forma across all 3 or 4 sites, for example. And I think that there's a really interesting opportunity, and I can't speak to Compass Nova Scotia specifically on this, but you know, the opportunity for like movement of membership, right? Like we've seen members love where they live and to live there for a very long time as a result, and that is beautiful. And it's maybe not necessarily practical for all. And so opportunities for movement within a portfolio of assets is an interesting prospect to be explored as a value add as a member.
Seconding that point, Chinatown definitely has some old mutual aid societies that have like downtown locations for youth who move out of the suburbs and once they have families again, then might return. I'm curious if you can give us a glimpse into the advocacy or the negotiation that led to the 75 number. Is it in ratio to a certain logic or a size of community or whatever besides just like, I guess, scale, or like was it a pattern observed from the size of lands available that people were anticipating applying to the program? And then second, I'm curious about the bullet point that said we might help you find or assemble a project team. Could you speak to, you know, your capacity to do that in the Essentials program?
Yeah. So answer the first question. Unfortunately, I can't speak to that because I actually don't know. I wasn't at the table for those negotiations. Practically speaking, it's been a fairly like I would say that we haven't had instances particularly where like proponents are like just on one side or the other of that 75 unit requirement. It's either, you know, they're much too little or they, you know, they meet those requirements quite well. So that leads me to believe that it's working more or less, but yeah, I can't speak to the reflection on that. I believe that there was some research that was done, but I can also inquire about that and get back to you just because I don't have that institutional knowledge, unfortunately. And then to your second question was on the development essentials. So yeah, we can support with procurement. So like, I mean, we've seen a lot of co-ops through this program do procurement. We're not experts on procurement across the country, evidently, but we are keeping track of, you know, who these co-ops are procuring with, and their experiences. And we have a great deal of templates to support you with, you know, your procurement and evaluation of those candidates. Because, you know, building an RFP is challenging, and making sure that you include like all of the nitty-gritty details in those procurement docs are very important because, you know, you'll run into challenges during your construction. And you know, some of you who have done construction will understand this completely, where you run into components that were just not considered or were out of scope, right? And it's a change order. And it results in cost escalation. And so, you know, just ensuring that like we're tracking what is causing those change orders and cost escalations and trying to include that and be as specific as possible in procurement. That's something that we're navigating, we're seeing, and we can provide advice to proponents who are looking to procure their project teams. We don't recommend like specific consultants. Like that's not our role. We're a membership organization. We're a federation. but we certainly do track it.
Yeah, I was surprised. Is it on?
Yeah, I think I can hear you.
Anyway, I was surprised at how low the estimate, or the actual costs were for submitting applications, $10,000 to $15,000. Like the one project I'm working on, we've spent $25,000 on site assessment stuff.
No.
And so I'm just wondering what's included in that. Like, is there any sort of design at that point?
There is, yeah, and you can, like, obviously, if you spend more, you're going to get more granular and you're going to produce a better application. A lot of it depends on site quality as well. Like if the municipality, like if you need to hire like a planning agency to support you through like the pre-planning process, that's a substantial cost. That's going to be like $6,000 to $8,000 right there. If you're working in a fairly large municipality. You can certainly bootstrap these things, but your application may not be as competitive as a result of putting less into the due diligence, right? So it's like, it's certainly on the lower end of like what I've seen. I've seen groups commit hundreds of thousands of dollars before, even putting a shovel in the ground. It's, I probably shouldn't have given you numbers because that benchmarks and it is so case by case that, every single piece of land is going to be different. Like one of the things about that piece of land that I was showing you is that it was not like it was a very obscure shape, right? And that resulted in like increased design costs to like do like the stepping like in the building back and trying to maximize the amount of units that were in that particular building design to try to get as close to the 240 as possible with like with a critical lens on like what was ultimately needed in that community from a unit mix and configuration standpoint is right. So like that project was the pre-development on that one was more expensive as a result of having to do some market study work as well to try to justify that, right? Because the proponent wasn't able to reach that 240 unit minimum requirement, and you need to provide a justification for that if there's going to be an exception made. So yeah, it's $25,000 does not surprise me. I would say that that's probably on the lower end, broadly speaking. So, which is tough because it's a lot of money. I don't have $25,000 to lay out on a pre-development project. So.
Okay, we've got time for one, maybe two more questions. Me? Can I ask another one while people think, is this working?
Yeah,
Okay,
I can hear you, Celia.
Okay, amazing. I'm wondering, I know that the program's relatively new, and so these projects are all still kind of under construction. There's a bit of time before they kind of, you get to occupancy and figuring out the kind of detailed day-to-day of operating these new co-ops. But I'm curious because this country has seen so little new co-op development in decades. What are groups doing to prepare for the process of operating and governing these new co-ops? And what kind of forms of support does the Co-op Housing Federation envision providing as they get to the challenges of forming a board and educating these new members about what it means to be part of a co-op and running a co-op and all of those complex. This is coming from, I previously worked with the co-op and it's really messy and tricky. So I'm just wondering kind of, people have lost, I think, those skills in some ways and the knowledge of how to form a new co-op in, a lot of parts of the country. How do you see that going?
It's beautifully messy.
Yes.
And in the way that community organizing is
Yes.
beautifully messy. But we do, I only went into one of the service offerings just because of limited time, but we do offer governance support to groups where we're also providing that service free to Cooperative Housing Development Program applicants to help folks organize, from a governance standpoint, their incorporation, their, rules of association or bylaws or whatever they're called in your specific province and expertise. helping build those out, helping with, you know, organization of meetings and adoption of borrowing requirements and bylaws where needed. And so we're fairly well resourced to be able to do that. And I would say that, you know, here in the Atlantic, you have an absolutely phenomenal team in Allison and company who can provide you with assistance on that as well and answer your questions. So I would say that from a capacity standpoint, we are well resourced to be able to do that. And we know that that's a tremendous challenge, and that, you know, my presentation today specifically spoke to the challenges related to development, but the challenges related to governance are almost even more important because they follow you throughout the life of your co-op and the election of new board members and directors, and the requirement for education, and what these co-ops are doing in many instances to create capacity is specifically related to like lease up and member interviews and orientation, like doing group interviews as opposed to like individual interviews for like larger scale developments and group orientations to not, you know, be doing like 140, 160 individual interviews. That takes a lot of time. Working with, you know, property managers who understand co-op housing, that's very important. Because there is more work involved in preparing, you know, board meeting minutes, reports, agendas, and the reporting requirements for that. So, you know, it's very important to work with a property manager who knows about working with co-ops. And, you know, you can also work with like existing co-ops in your area. Like they probably have wait lists. And if you're looking to like expedite your lease up process, there's no better way to do that than to start with a list that already exists. And so working in partnership with those co-ops to try to leverage what already exists to facilitate lease up. Because the quicker you can get to stabilization, which means that you know, you're generating enough money to cover your interest payments as well as principal payments, the sooner you can start paying off that mortgage, and paying off that mortgage feels good.
Fabulous. Okay, we are basically at time, so I think we'll wrap there.
Thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Happy to assist.